We didn't have cell phones. We really spent a lot of one-on-one time together. And I think at that time in history at Beverly Hills High School, 75, 76, 77, we were still kind of innocent in that we really had a dream of finding the ideal mate, someone who was beautiful, someone that we idealized. And we were very romantic at that period in history in the 70s. And I know that doesn't sound like Beverly Hills High School because you think of the Lamborghinis and the Gucci handbags and all the wealth and the mansions. Well, that was all going on. But when you ever got any of us alone one on one, we were actually very kind of tender-hearted, romantic young people, and we all dreamed of finding a beautiful person to live our life with. And I did meet a really nice young lady, but there's a Romeo and Juliet story here, Candace, because this young lady was Jewish and I was Catholic. Later to become a Christian, and her family said, "No, no, 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 you're not going to get serious about a non-Jewish boy." Oh, and it devastated me. It took me a long time to get over that. But that was all part of the landscape of Michael parachuting into this new high school, this playland called Beverly Hills High School, and that was one of the little bumps along the way. Okay, so what's your next question? Okay, about the movies at the time. Fantastic movies. Movies were made differently then. We had some of the best filmmakers in American history during that time. We still had Stanley Kubrick, who did wonderful films like 2001. We had Francis Ford Coppola in the Godfather movies. We had Sam Peckinpah. We had William Friedkin. He did The Exorcist. Now, that movie came out a couple of years before I started at Beverly, and that movie just absolutely freaked people out, Candace. They had never seen such a stark portrayal of evil, of Satan actually inhabiting the body of a young girl in this eerie backdrop of Washington, D.C. And oh my goodness, people were running out of theaters. They were so frightened. That was about 2 years before I started at Beverly. Right. So those movies, I particularly liked Al Pacino and John Travolta. John Travolta and I both have the same widow's peak. Actually, my father knew John Travolta, and he's apparently a really nice guy. And I did a lot of dancing, a lot of disco dancing, and learned a few moves from Saturday Night Fever for sure. But those movies, then another one was called Serpico, which is Serpico. Everyone should see the movie. Probably Al Pacino's best movie. And do you know about Serpico? It's a really cool story. It's a true story, Candace. It's about a New York City police officer who's very honest. The whole force at the time is accepting graft. You know, they're accepting payoffs and there's corruption. True story. And he said, "No, I'm not taking a dollar. I'm going to be an honest police officer." And they went out to kill him, and he wore all these really kind of cool hippie disguises. He wore a beard and ponchos and cool hats. He lived in Greenwich Village. Oh, he became my idol. So sometimes I would dress kind of disco, sometimes I would dress kind of hippie style, like Serpico. And I'm part Italian, and I really connected to that too. So that was really, really good. Okay, next question. Mm-hmm. Oh, about just technology back then. Well, in the 1970s at Beverly Hills High School, remember, no cell phones. So we pretty much had to be on time for appointments. When we had a date with a young lady, you had to be there. Otherwise, you had to run to a payphone to let her know you were in traffic. So that didn't happen. And that also brought us into closer contact with one another. Because remember, during my time at Beverly Hills High School, when we went out to a coffee shop or we hung out on the weekends, there was no cell phone distraction. You could not get away from looking eye to eye with this girl that you loved. And you were observing her, her lips and her eyes and the way she, sipped her coffee, and you observed each other. And then you'd go back and tell your friend about, "Oh, I think I'm in love with so and so." And I'm not sure if that happens today because the people are there, but their minds are on the media. And after they leave, they go and they text, and that really interrupts that, well, that more normal, earthy cadence of human interaction from which love arises, by the way. Love doesn't happen quickly. You have to nurture and be with people, look in their eyes, spend time with them, and most importantly, share your dreams. Because when your dreams match up, you really lay a great foundation for a beautiful marriage. And then, of course, you have to be in covenant. I'm a Christian, and there's no marriage without covenant with God. It's a compact with God, and you two must be evenly yoked and believers in Jesus Christ, because without our Lord Jesus, there is nothing. Okay? What else would you like to know? I have time for one more question about Beverly Hills High School in the 1970s. Mm-hmm. Any bad things like drugs and all that kind of bad stuff that you've heard rumors about? Yes, and I will explain that to you, okay? So write all this down. Yes, there were drugs, and there was one called, well, Quaaludes that was very big on the campus around 1976, 1977. And the young kids had a lot of money. Beverly Hills has an interesting geography, Candace. It's sort of sectioned in two, and I'll explain it to you. North, I'm sure you've heard of Santa Monica Boulevard, but north of Santa Monica Boulevard is where all the wealth is. And that runs all the way up into an area called Truesdale Estates, which is adjacent to Bel Air. That's where all the really rich kids lived. And south of Santa Monica Boulevard, pushing more toward Wilshire, Olympic, and down to Pico, those are really more normal people. They lived in cottage apartments, two-bedroom houses, and I'm sure they had money in the bank, but their wealth could not match north of Santa Monica Boulevard. Now, I mention this because those kind of drug parties mostly happen north of Santa Monica Boulevard. And let me tell you something, there were Saturdays that I drove through that section of Beverly Hills, maybe by myself or with a friend or two, and you would see the whole mansion aglow in lights. You probably heard Pink Floyd or maybe Wild Cherry or Led Zeppelin music blasting. You would just park your car and walk in. You didn't even need to be invited. And there was kind of a Hollywood party going on that was just pretty unbelievable. Now, to get to your question about drugs, I never did drugs. And this is something that I've talked about in my work and in my books, but for whatever reason, Michael never ever partook or had an interest in drugs. Just never did. And quite honestly, my father, who grew up in the 1950s, was a musician part-time. And I'll be honest with you, Candace, he did have some problems with that area. And it put something in me where I thought I will never ever touch drugs. So it was kind of strange for the kids at Beverly, because I had the look and I had the hair and the clothes and I kind of looked like a rock star, but yet I never did anything like drugs, and they were kind of confused about it. But I never really needed to explain myself. I was very respected at Beverly Hills High School. Everyone knew I didn't take drugs. I never drank either. And but I was a guy who still liked to have a good time. And as far as the drugs were concerned, I'll just say this. Yes, I would go to a party, and in the corners, I would see things going on. There were often events where a person would pass out in a bathroom. That type of thing would happen, regrettably. And you just try to be a gentleman and help out. But there's something you need to know. And this is something I wrote about in my book. And by the way, the entire story that I'm telling is told in my best-selling book, which is called Godspell BHHS, The Amazing 70s at Beverly Hills High School. Everyone in the world should read this book. There's never been a book written like this, which chronicles the 1970s, and from the perspective of a very, very unique young man who was trying to find God. And this book is such a page turner. It was a bestseller on Amazon, and I really recommend it. Okay? Gospel BHHS. And I mentioned in this book something about the drugs at Beverly. At no time in my 2 years there Remember, I was a transfer student. At no time did I ever once see drugs on campus. They had a security detail, Candace. They had a couple of men who walked around, and they made sure that that never went on. And they did a great job. Once again, I never saw any trace of drugs on the campus of Beverly Hills High School. Not in a bathroom, someone making a deal by a locker. Never saw it. Maybe it happened. I knew all the high profile people. I was very popular, very well known. Never saw it. However, off campus at those parties, a whole different thing. And in many cases, what would happen, I hate to tell you this, but very wealthy kids had parents who would go away for the weekend. They would fly off to Mammoth or Palm Springs or New York, and they would kind of leave their house to their kids, and the kids maybe just sort of summarily stated, "Hey, mom and dad, do you mind if I have a little party?" Well, that little party turned out to be an all-night bash, and the things that went on, the parents didn't often know about. My parents were very liberal with me. They always trusted me, and they actually could because I really didn't do anything bad as a kid, other than being a bit girl crazy. Okay, so I'm being honest with you. Do you have one final question about Beverly Hills High School in the 1970s? Mm-hmm. My fondest memory. Well, the first couple of months that I was at Beverly, I was unattached. I didn't have any friends. I didn't have a girlfriend. It was just Michael. And in a way I liked that because I was able to explore and take it all in. And this campus, I hope you could visit it someday. There are two sections to it, Candace. There's what's called the new building, the old building. The new building for us was new at the time. It was a very modular kind of multiplex with a planetarium, beautiful view of Century City. But the old building harkens back probably to the maybe even the 1920s. It's sort of a French Normandy look. It looks a little bit like Harvard. So I was exploring the campus and taking it all in, and I had just come from a very small private school, which basically encompassed a parking lot. And now I'm at one of the most beautiful, sumptuous, famous high schools in the world, and in co-ed. And I'm just kind of getting to explore everything. And I'll leave this with you. Something really interesting happened my first month at Beverly Hills High School. So there I was putting on my best clothes and trying to meet new people. And my sister one day says to me, Michael, my former high school, which was an all girls school, is doing a play. And they need a guy to play the lead. And this play is very famous. It's called The Miracle Worker. It was actually a very, very classic Hollywood movie. It's about a blind, deaf girl who's really brought back from the abyss by a very special kind of social worker named Annie Sullivan. Anyway, so she says to me, Michael, you're going to try out for the play at my old high school. And I said, no, I'm not. I had no interest in being an actor. To make a long story short, I was given the lead in that play. I played Captain Keller, so for my first 4 or 5 weeks at Beverly, I was taking the bus to rehearsals every day. Well, that just gave me more glimmer and more appeal. Now all of a sudden, this new guy who's good looking, dresses like Al Pacino, he's acting in a play and at another campus. This even added more intrigue and mystery about Michael. And I didn't ask for it, and I never wanted to be an actor, but what I did become later, and I'll end on this, Candace. And this was something that I brought to my presidency in 2029 and 2030, and this shook the world. And that's called blue light. Yes. Blue light is more than dance, it's more than expression. It's really a form of movement prayer. It's a way that we connect to one another through song and dance and movement and light effects, where we bring the Holy Spirit out of ourselves and we portray it and animate it and vivify it through movement. And everyone can do it. Everyone can do it. You could be in a wheelchair and be a blue light artist. And it all began for me, Candace, at Beverly Hills High School, because one day the the dance troupe leader, her name was Meryl Van Woy, asked me to be part of the dance company. And I thought, wait a minute, Disco Michael, martial artist Michael, karate Michael. I've never done martial arts before. But she basically thought, Michael, with your karate, you're good at moving, and you are like a disco guy. That's enough. We'll work with you and train you. So, so I wound up taking ballet lessons, really working hard at it, learning how to turn and pirouette. And meanwhile, the girls who populated this dance troupe at Beverly Hills High School were just absolutely brilliant. These were young ladies, Candace, who had dedicated their lives to being dancers. And all of a sudden, they've got Michael. But I learned and I picked up a few things, and I wound up doing a solo in the show to a Marvin Gaye disco song, and I was a big hit. And it really was important, though, because later on, when I became president, I knew, Candace, I know to this day that we cannot communicate God's grace and His infinite beauty with human words. They fall short. We have to move and express ourselves through an art form, and that's called blue light. And because of Beverly Hills High School and because of my participation in that modern dance show, it lit the flame within Michael. Okay? Well, God bless you. We have a remarkable world. And I just want to remind everyone, if you really want to go deep and really know my story about the 1970s at Beverly Hills High School, read this book, Godspell, BHHS. And by the way, Godspell has a certain special place in this book. It's a little bit of a secret. You'll find out about it in the first 2 chapters. I talk about my family, my friends, the famous people that went to the school. It's all packed in here, chock full, as they say. And by the way, it's also my plan to make it into a movie. Okay, Godspell, BHHS. It's available in ebook and in hardcover, so there's no excuse not to read it, and you will not put it down. Okay, Candace, God bless you. I hope I gave you a great interview, and I'm going to hop on Air Force One right now. I'm up here at the cabin. Thank you so much. You're very welcome. Bye bye now.